Welcome to the Creativity Lab, the podcast that shows how to channel your creativity to live your best, most beautiful life. And now here's your host, Director of the Creativity Lab at West Los Angeles College, Harvard PhD, TV writer, and Professor, Dr. Katherine Boutry.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Each episode, we discuss a creative approach to life's challenges. Today, we'll talk to LA writer and former West LA College student Jaime Sandoval about the importance of finding your creative community. Jaime discusses writing, dreaming scenes, getting back to the page each day, and struggling with feelings of isolation, as well as the importance of, as he puts it, having grace with yourself. Jaime graduated from UCLA and is a 2022 Periplus Fellow. His work can be found in Masque Spectacle. Jaime, thank you so much for coming in today. One of the things I remember about you the most, being your professor for a couple of classes we had together, is how you were always in the front row, always super prepared. And when I found out a little bit more about your personal journey, I was so inspired by you. I wonder if you'd share with us a little bit today. What did a typical day look like for you when you were at West LA College?
I would have to wake up really early, maybe 6 or 7:30 in the morning, because I had to catch a shift at the mall before I even got any of my classes done. So I would go over there, I would open the store, be there for a couple of hours, and then I'd just grab a pretzel on the way out, come to campus, which, fortunately was a little close, change out of my uniform because I just didn't want to show up in my uniform to class, because I wanted to respect those boundaries between, school and work. And so I would, change in the car, go to my class, maybe your class probably, have a class for a couple of hours. Then I would have to dip off a little early because I'd have to go all the way to South Central to catch another shift there. And those shifts were usually 8 p.m. to 1 in the morning.
1 in the morning?
Yeah, it was a grocery store, so there was a lot of stocking and a lot of stuff to do, and that was the job that I transferred from when I first moved to LA. So I really kind of had to keep it because I went through a lot of trouble of transferring, and so it was really hard shifts and really far away. There was a lot of traffic, and then when I would get off at 1, and then I would just come back home, try to sleep as much as possible, and kind of repeat it. It wasn't like that every day, but it was like that at least 3 days a week.
How did you get your homework done?
That's a good question. I think I learned to utilize my time, my downtime in those jobs. At the grocery store, there was never any downtime, but later on, when I was working at the mall, I worked at a store that didn't have a lot of foot traffic, so as long as I was greeting people, my bosses were okay with me doing a little bit of reading on the side. I just always had my textbook next to my cash register. During my lunches, I would try to do some homework. Just basically any time that I could squeeze out, because I knew that by the time I got home at night, I was just gonna knock out. I was not one of those students that would pull all-nighters. For me, it was if I didn't get it done by midnight, it wasn't gonna get done,
I had the same thing. I had college jobs that would allow me to do a little bit of work on the side all through college and graduate school. What was your load like? It sounds like you'd only be able to take 1 or 2 classes with that kind of load.
I was taking 5 classes.
Oh my.
Yeah, I was taking four in-person classes and 1 online class. So that 1 online class did help a lot because it gave me a little bit more flexibility to do it whenever I could. But the other classes I did have to make sure that I was there because, attendance was taken. And I didn't really have, I had just moved to LA when I started college, so I didn't have friends from high school here or other acquaintances that I could just, ask for the assignment or ask for help. It was pretty much, if I couldn't go, I was going to miss out on that whole lesson. And I surely didn't have time to go get free tutoring in the library and make it up. It was kind of a complete loss. So I really had to make sure that I was there.
But it's not like you were scraping by. I mean, you were definitely one of my strongest students, complete A student. It was very impressive, actually. I would have had no idea that you were changing in your car before class and staying up till 1 a.m. working every day. What brought you to LA originally?
At the time, I really wanted to work in the film industry, and so I thought, what's the best place to go for the film industry? I thought to come to LA, and originally I was majoring in English, in film. And then when I took your class, actually, I just started realizing just how much passion I had for the writing and the craft of it, and as much as I do love the behind the scenes technical aspect of it, I think it was really my love for writing that really kept me coming to your class so eagerly, because I always just knew that I was going to learn something that was going to be special and that was going to be so insightful. And especially when we got into, the romantic literature, that's when I really just found something that I really loved. And it made it less of a chore to have to go to class, because I actually wanted to. If anything, it was a chore to go to work. I wanted to go to class.
So after West LA, where did you go?
I transferred to UCLA. I was there and I got a BA in English and a concentration in creative writing. And I think that was some of my best time spent at UCLA was in workshops with other writers and reading what they had to write and learning how to constructively criticize and how to help them make their story the best that they could be, and seeing that they wanted the same for me. They just wanted to accept it for what it was and help me build it for what it was, rather than change it or prescribe to any other notions.
Tell me about your Periplus Fellowship.
I was accepted into the Periplus Fellowship for 2022, and what that is a mentorship collective where this group of volunteers that is comprised of very successful published authors of color come together, and they offer mentorship to, as it were, the next generation of writers of color for free. And I was lucky enough to be chosen for that, and I'm working with the writer Kirsten Valdez Quaid, who has been an enormous help already in the time that we spent together. So it's great because it's not only a little bit of mentorship every month, but we also formed a community with all of the fellows, and we have, a group chat where we send, a submission, pitches, and if anybody needs help workshopping a story, they can send it in there. And so it really is such a beautiful community of writers of color all over the country, and we're all just looking out for each other. So that's been the most surprising aspect of that, because I mostly went into it for the mentorship, and that has been great. But on top of that, the sense of community and not feeling so alone in such a competitive industry has been brilliant.
It's really hard to be a writer, and it's not just sitting at your desk by yourself. I feel like the same, that having a community makes all the difference when you have deadlines, you have someone to share your writing with. We don't just exist in a vacuum. Tell me about your writing. What's your genre?
I'm trying to try different things. I'm a very big fan of horror and sci-fi, and I want to braid a little bit of those genres in with literary fiction that I write. I tend to write a lot about feelings and the kind of confrontations where you are having to figure out what to say while you're still not even sure how you can process what was just said to you. And those really intense moments, try to capture that interiority and the complexity of every character, and how we have so many things pulling at us in different directions before we can even decide what we're going to say and if that is the best course of action. So I think my characters tend to be alienated and a little bit unsure of themselves.
Would you say that your experiences, your life experiences, have shaped the topics that you write about or the characters that you create?
Definitely. I think one of the big things that I've noticed is, like I said, a lot of my characters are alienated or kind of like estranged from family members, which is something that I share with them. And I think that that's something that keeps me wanting to discover, because that's where I try to write from, is from a place of discovery. Because if I write something that I know too well, it very quickly goes into the memoir area. And if I want to write fiction, I need to write about something that I'm very curious about and that I want to learn more about. And I think being estranged from people or feeling alienated is a feeling that can happen at any point in life, but it always looks different. Feeling alienated in your teen years is so different from feeling alienated in your 20s. And I don't know what it's like to feel alienated in your 30s, but I'm sure I'll find out and I'll write about it when I get there.
Would you say that you felt alienated when you first came to LA, perhaps?
With the city, yes. I felt, everybody here was so beautiful and always worked out and very tan. But I think when I came to West, I really found a community here, because I realized that all of my classmates were also, going to other jobs and shuffling between classes and changing in the bathroom. I really felt like I had a community here. I think if anything, when I went to UCLA, I felt a little bit like a fish out of water, because I think I expected there to be a lot more transfer students and a lot more of a commuter culture. but it is different. The people that live there get to have a very different experience than those of us who were driving in. But I still was able to find a good community there. It was just a little tougher to find it, and I really had to put myself out there a little more than I did here.
What's your writing practice like? Can you describe that? Is it regular? Do you have certain rituals? Lots of writers have rituals. I know I have to empty the dishwasher before I sit down to write to kind of prep your mind for it. Do you have anything like that? Is it regular? Do you write every day?
I write most every day. It's something that I've definitely tried to work more on this year ever since my fellowship started, because I really wanted to have something to show for at the end of the year, and I knew that my writing practice was too irregular. So now I do write about 3 to 4 days a week. I have a novel that I'm working on that takes most of my time, but I do try to work on short story revisions so that I can, send those stories out and try to see if I can get them published. But I think the most important thing for me is the night before, I need to fall asleep thinking and kind of dreaming about the thing that I'm planning on writing the day after. So if I come to the computer and I don't have a scene in mind, it's not going to be a productive day. I'm pretty much just going to be pulling teeth and writing and undoing and writing and undoing. But if I take some time the night before and I think this is a scene, these are the emotions, and I just kind of fall asleep. Sometimes I have to write things down right before I fall asleep, but even if I don't, I think those things come back to me in the morning when I'm sitting at the computer and I'm thinking about that same scene, that, connective tissue between the thoughts I was having last night and the thoughts I'm having this morning kind of, they mend themselves, and I'm able to bring a lot more into it. So I think that definitely intention is important, but I think also having grace with yourself when you're just not in a place where you can write something that emotional. I think a lot of my writing draws from my experiences, and so sometimes that can be emotionally taxing, and day after day it can be a lot. And so sometimes I just have to say, hey, you wrote about it for 2 days, that's great. Now we're going to write some sci-fi nonsense writing exercise that's just going to clear your head, make you feel good, and you still got something written,
Do you think that your creativity helped you in your journey with your education and life, aside from your amazing creative writing? Do you use it in other aspects of your life?
Absolutely. I think creative problem solving is one of those things that you can apply to anything, and I think that that's something that I had to do when I was working 3 jobs and going to school full time. I had to figure out how I could squeeze the most time out of my schedule, and also money. When I was working at a pizza place, I knew that I could get free pizza while I was on the clock, so I would, I wouldn't eat at home. I would go early, eat there, and then I would eat during my lunch, and then I would make a little pizza for myself right before I left, and there's 3 meals that I don't have to pay. When I was working at the grocery store, my job was to discount the food that was going to go near its expiration date, and so then I got first dibs on discounted groceries. When I was working at the mall, I had a plenitude of free time, so I used that to do my homework. So I think I just had to look at what I had, and I felt that even though it was very tough, I was very lucky to be able to find 3 jobs and hold 3 jobs, even though they were kind of pulling me apart at the seams. I knew that I had to grasp the opportunity and kind of make things last. Because the biggest thing that made me do that was that my financial aid was delayed for months. It's one of those things that you take for granted. You just expect that you're going to get the money, and sometimes it takes months. And so for those months, I really was scrambling. But I survived it, and I'm very proud of myself. And I think it had to do with the fact that I really had to be really conscientious of all the time that I spent and the money that I spent, because those are the things that, as a college student, you don't have a lot of.
What was the biggest obstacle that you faced, either as a student at West or in pursuing a creative career?
I think the biggest obstacle was not having a support system here in LA. I certainly had my grandpa, who is a professor in Mexico, was really encouraging me to pursue higher education, and he was always a big supporter of that. But they weren't here, and I think that really could have helped, because I couldn't just go home and have a home cooked meal that my grandma would just make me, and just all of those things that family in town offers. When I got a flat tire, I didn't have anybody that I could call. Little things like that would have made a big difference. And I think because of that, that's why I had to take on so many jobs, because there would be some things that you could kind of pool resources from family or kind of be like, oh, well, I don't have any groceries, let me go eat at my grandma's, but I couldn't do that. And so those things really piled up, and especially the cost of living in LA is so expensive that on the few times that my grandparents could send me money, it was like parking money, at the very most. So I think that's where a lot of that stemmed from, was just not having that support system, and also not having a plan, because I wasn't really planning on going to college when I was in high school. So all of my preparation for college literally started a couple of months before I was about to start taking the classes, and I didn't have a major, I didn't have like an education plan, I didn't have anything like that. That all came from here.
That's incredible. I didn't know that about you.
I went to EOPNS, and they got me set up with a counselor who made me an education plan, who held me accountable to seeing them 3 times per quarter. So I always knew that I had to keep my grades up in order to keep the priority enrollment that was allowing me to, speed through my classes and get out of here in 2 years. And I was able to do that with their help. So I really came into this experience with not a lot, and just with the resources that were here on campus, I was able to do it all in 2 years.
I feel like I understand how you overcame it materially, but how did you overcome that feeling separate, feeling alone psychologically? Did you have any fixes for that, or did you just power through? How did you find that resilience to keep going?
Well, I think at the time I didn't think of it as resilience. I just felt like I was in survival mode. I felt like I had to do what I had to do. I knew that 2 jobs wasn't going to be enough, so I took a third one. And then I knew that once I had the third job, I had to keep them all. I have a problem letting people down, and so I think that if anything, that kind of helped a little bit, because I didn't want to let down any of the people that I had given my commitment to, including my professors and my bosses. And so I really was just doing everything I could to just be a good student, be a good worker. But I think I also got really lucky that I was able to find community in those jobs. I became friends with a lot of those people. And so even though I didn't really have a social life outside of work and school, I did have a social life in work and school, which, that goes a really long way, because if you can just have a laugh in the middle of a really stressful day, that really changes everything. It changes your mood and your outlook on everything. And I think that's why I was able to keep going, because I was lucky enough to have a good community in those spaces, and especially once I started working on campus, it just felt that much better, because I really felt like I had a community. I knew the professors that were walking the halls, I knew the people that were coming for tutoring, and it just made me feel less alone.
Was there a lesson that you learned from that experience?
That I'm resilient, I think. Definitely, because just telling those experiences to people, I just stated them, very matter of fact, and sometimes people would be like, whoa, like that's huge. And, just when I told you these things and you were so impressed, I just felt like, oh, is that, it made me realize that was impressive, and that I was proud of myself at a younger age, because I don't know where that little boy learned those things, but I know them now. And I think that's definitely something that I can turn into a source of strength. Even at everything that I go through now, I think back to that kid who had just started college and was working 3 jobs, and I'm like, he was doing all this just to set me up for where I am now, and I'm not going to let him down.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're going to make me cry. I love that. You should be incredibly proud of what you've done. I hope you are every day. You've been through so much and overcome so much and proven so much. Do you still have moments where you face fears or uncertainties?
Absolutely. I am probably 90% uncertainty as a human, but it's something that I've learned to get better at, because I think I tend to catastrophize, and so everything can be the end of the world, and sometimes I just have to take a step back and think, okay, is this really the end of the world? And it usually isn't. And I think once I just get a little bit of perspective on it, I try to just break it up into manageable steps, because I think things that take a long time can overwhelm me, and I can feel like it's not worth the effort very quickly. But if I can break it down into things that I can do throughout the week instead of having to do it all at once, I've noticed that is a huge help. And I think that so many of the things that I avoided when I was younger just could have been okay if I had just taken it one step at a time rather than try to power through everything.
If you had any advice to give to West LA college students or community college students in general who wanted to live a creative life, who wanted to live their best lives, who wanted to maybe pursue a career in writing, what would you suggest?
The only piece of advice that I can give is take care of your mental health, because your condition dictates your experience. And I think a lot of the times when I did feel like giving up, it was because I was in a bad headspace, not necessarily because I couldn't do it. And I am just so grateful that both here at West and at UCLA, I had free mental health services that were offered, with a student health fee or with some sort of a pretty minute fee considering what tuition costs, that was included, and that I could go and see a therapist in between classes and just have somebody reiterate to me that the things that I had done so far showed great resilience and that I could tap into that again with what I was going through now. Because at UCLA, I almost dropped out maybe 3 or 4 times.
Really?
Because I really felt like I really felt like I couldn't do it. I felt like I was letting everyone down. I felt like I had squandered the potential that I had when I first arrived, and I felt like I hadn't done enough with it. And if you would have asked me, I would have told you that I was failing probably 3 of my classes, but I graduated with honors, So I think a lot of the times in my head, it felt a lot worse than it was. And so I think that that's what happens to a lot of people, is that sometimes we don't have an outlet or we don't have a support system. And obviously nothing can make up for that, but mental health services can certainly help.
That's really powerful. What's next for you? What's your next project?
Well, at the moment, I'm working on a novel that is not autobiographical, but it does deal with a lot of things from my upbringing and my relationship with my estranged parents, which is something that I really feel like I have to get out. I feel kind of like James Baldwin when he wrote Go Tell It on the Mountain. He said, this is the book I have to write if I'm ever going to write anything else. And that's how I feel with this novel. And as much as I just want to get it out of my system, I know that it's going to take me years and it's going to be a commitment. And so I'm trying to think of it as a marathon and not a race, and just write constantly, but also give myself breaks to explore other ideas, whether it be in short story or poetry. So that's definitely what I'm most excited about. But I'm just as excited about revising my old short stories and sending them out to publications, because for so long I didn't have that belief in myself, and I would write something, I would like it, but I would feel like it wasn't finished and it would just get locked back up in the vault. And now I'm realizing that there's so much potential in all of those drafts, and there's so much that I can do with them, and it's just a matter of taking a couple days out of my week to work on those and tend to those and send them out. And I recently had a short story published, which I'm really proud of, and it just kind of showed me that there is potential there, and that it's just a matter of giving yourself a little bit of time, and a little bit of time away from the page, and also a little bit of time to just give it a little bit of TLC,
Congratulations on the publication. Where can we find your short story?
It's on an online journal called Masque Spectacle. The story is called Human Behavior.
That's fantastic. Jaime, thank you so much for being here today. This was really, really inspirational on so many levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.